All right, this is now working. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Tried another way of starting it by scheduling a live stream and it didn't automatically start. So now we're going. So take this moment to say hello. Hello, everybody. This is Lieutenant Michael Flynn with the United States Air Force Band of the West in San Antonio, Texas. Take a minute and share this video with your friends who might be trying to find this video through the scheduled live stream, which didn't work, unfortunately. So we're here today to talk about some score study basics. And this is actually in direct response to your comments that you sent to me through the personal messaging system and also through the comments in the last few videos asking for more information about how I do score studies. So I'm actually going to be going through this process today. I've got a couple of things. I've got a stack of paper with the first 5 pages of Magnolia Star by Steve Danyew, which you can find actually at a link. I'll see if I can link that into the description as we go in the description of the video. So here it is in the comments section. There we go. If you click on that, you can follow along, and actually you can take an idea about what I'm doing here. I'm going to be showing a number of things that I've done along the way. You can see that there's some color in there as well. And I've also got a blank score. So the process is going to be talking a little bit about each step, doing a little bit of each step on its own, and then you can actually see the final product as well. So really, thanks for checking this out, finding me on Facebook. If you have missed anything in the past, we talked about Cajun folk songs early on this week. That video is still available. You can see it on my Facebook. It's actually being shared to the Band of the West Facebook as well. Also, if you're interested, you will be putting those videos up this weekend on YouTube, and you can check those out there as well. So lots of resources for you. I'm still going back and looking at the comments of those videos, and I'm always checking my messenger on Facebook. So please continue sending in your comments and suggestions and things that I missed or things that you'd like me to cover through those mediums. It would be just fantastic to hear from everybody. If you're watching right now and it's working, I see Tamara, thank you for liking this video. If you are watching and you're enjoying it, or even if you're just watching it and seeing if you're going to enjoy it, go ahead and post in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from and how you're dealing with the coronavirus and kind of the staying at home. Part of the thing that I'm doing at staying at home is studying some new music. And so going through how to look at some new music is what we're going to be talking about today. So again, this is Lieutenant Michael Flynn. I'm with the United States Air Force Band of the West, based in San Antonio, Texas. Please send your interest in these videos and your interest in what we'd like to talk about next, and say, oh yeah, what about these pieces? What about these pieces? Part of what I'm doing right now is taking suggestions for new pieces to take a look at, and we're going to be talking about them next Monday, rather on Wednesday. On next Monday, we're going to be talking about rehearsal planning. So we've got some really, really great stuff coming. So fantastic oboe player watching as well. Mateo, thank you for checking it out, and Mom watching from Cape Cod. So hopefully we get a few other people who are kind of streaming in for this stream. So score study basics. We're using Magnolia Star. You've got an idea of checking out this piece of music by a link that's provided in the description. Composer Steve Danyew is an excellent friend of mine who we went to school at Miami together, at the University of Miami, and he's been generous enough to say, yeah, go ahead and talk about this piece of music. He sent me a score to kind of take a look at, and we're going to go from that as using this as a resource. So a couple of things that I start out with for any type of score that I'm looking at. I always start out with the cover page. So whenever you're looking at anything, regardless of if you've picked it already or not, you can take a look at the cover page. Sometimes it has some information on it that might be useful. This particular one says that Steve Danyew is the composer. Also, it says it has the copyright 2012. What that tells me is actually that the composer is likely still alive. The very next thing that I'm going to be doing is Googling this composer. Now, I happen to know Steve in person, so I don't have to Google everything about him, but a quick Google search will tell you a little bit about the composer and more than likely give you a way to get in touch with them. I encourage everyone who's doing a piece of music by a living composer to contact that composer and let them know that you're studying their music. Let them know that you're programming their music, playing their music, and they will most likely get back to you. If you have questions, email them to them. Say, hey, what about the oboe part in here? Well, what about flute parts here? They will get back to you because they love having their music played. I strongly encourage it. So that's the title page done. Bam. Next thing I look at is going to be whatever is on the inside cover. In this case, it's going to be the instrumentation. Now, if you look here, this is a tiny, tiny, tiny score. And this is because we were able to print this out on our personal printer at home. So all of the scores are really small. I personally prefer to have gigantic scores because I can see them a little bit better. This is not for everybody. This is just a suggestion. I like having them blown up to 11 by 17 at least. At least I have that. And I can actually see things that are going on quite a bit better using it that way. So I look at this. In here, we've got the instrumentation. There's an interesting note on the instrumentation where the composer says, yeah, you can double this and you can make some changes, which is great news. A lot of composers, they'll respond to you, say, well, we don't have an oboe player. Can we do this instead? That kind of an idea. Other things really important about this score is that he talks about notes from this piece is based on an idea that he had when he was playing middle school jazz band. He's a saxophone player. And so he was playing these blues scales, and he always wanted to have a piece that was based on the blues scale. So before you even start looking at the music, you know that this is based on the blues scale. So, okay, I have a concept of what's happening here. It says it's on the blues scale. It's going to be based on trains, which use their transportation methods to get the music, this blues music across the country. And so you have an idea about what this piece might be all about. It gives you some other ideas. It's going to be C minor triad, E flat minor triad, and E flat major triad. So there's some items in there that you might use for analysis, which is really good. Talks about driving rhythms using the train analogy. Also, a little bit about the title. It says Magnolia Star is an Illinois Central train that ran from New Orleans to Chicago with the famous Panama Limited in the mid 20th century. So if I'm doing this piece, the first thing I'm going to do is read through the first couple of pages. And in that, I might have some information that helps me. In this case, it does, which is really great. A lot of times it's a way for the composer to connect with the people who are playing their music. It's a very interesting medium in that the composer's mind has all of this wonderful stuff. It comes out on the paper, and then we just get the paper afterwards. It's very difficult. And so realizing what the composer is imagining, sometimes the composer has input into that he or she would like to put into the introduction of the piece. So as we go into the piece, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the details of the video, in the description of this video. It has a number of different steps that I take when I do my score study. So I'm actually going to go ahead and post those one by one as we go through them in the comment section, so you can have an idea about what that is looking like as well. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is Lieutenant Michael Flynn with the United States Air Force Band of the West in San Antonio, Texas, talking about Magnolia Star by Steve Danyew. So when you look at score study techniques, the score study techniques that I use is a combination of things that I've learned over the years. And I've found a lot of things that I like, things that work for me, and things that don't work for me. And so use this video as a resource. Maybe you disagree with almost everything I'm saying, but you agree with step 6. So then use that. Certainly for everyone whose mind works in a different fashion, looking at music is going to work differently for you as well. These are just some tips and some guidelines that I do. I would recommend coming up with a process. A lot of times we get this music and there's just notes everywhere, and we've got rehearsal next week and I don't know where to start. Well, if you have a process down, you can start going through those steps and be more successful, not only in the product, but also determining what steps work for you. So if you know you've done this in a specific order and you say, well, I really didn't like writing in red. Well, then don't write in red. You've at least learned that through having a process. So have a process. Have a way to do it. So I'm actually going to be talking about conveniently a 10-step process, which seems overwhelming, absolutely. But overwhelming is what scores are. Look at all that information. There's so much. How do I even start? So again, having a process is going to be really, really important. If you're just checking into the video, I saw Rosie, you had said, thanks for sharing, and we've got some comments in there. Go ahead and type in the comment section where you're watching from, if you have any questions or comments, or if you have any ideas for the upcoming videos that you'd like to see. So first thing I do is I leaf through the score and I read through it, giant quotations on reading. So basically what I'm doing is I'm looking through, and I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, and basically what I do is I look at kind of time signatures, ranges of instruments. There's something that's really, really high or really, really low, or something that's written uncharacteristically for the instrument, and giant patches of black, because those are going to be where a lot of the technical difficulties that the players have. And I kind of look through it and determine what I'm doing in visualization for the players, and looking for this in terms of the ensemble. For example, when I was teaching at university, perhaps I would have a really, really weak trumpet section and a really, really strong clarinet section. So as I'm leafing through the music, I say, oh, what about this trumpet line here? Are they going to be able to play it? What about this clarinet line? Or are they going to be able to play it? And thinking of those in terms of the musicians that you have. Or perhaps you have a section that's really outstanding. Maybe the tuba section is fantastic, and you're looking for a piece to kind of feature them. And so you start looking for lines that are on their own, perhaps in a featured role. So I go through and I kind of leaf through, and as I'm going through, please feel free to click on that link that's in the description, where you can access the score. And if you're actually having trouble finding that, I'm going to put a link to Steve Danyew's music page in there, and you can find it through his works section. And in the works, you can see preview score. There's a really nice bio of Steve as well in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there as well, just in case you can't find it through the previous link. If you have found it in a previous link and you find a link that's working, if you could actually post that in there, that would be really, really helpful. Okay, so I'm reading through this. I'm looking at this. Okay, so it's in 7/8. Okay. Oh, I don't know about that. We'll see. So 7/8 has got some pretty block scoring in the first portion with the woodwinds, and then block scoring in the brass, and then back with the woodwinds and the brass, and woodwinds and brass. So lots of individualized percussion, and eventually everybody comes together. Lots of meter changes and going into 4. So that's kind of my overall scope of the first 5 pages. The first 5 pages is what we're looking at. And this is about the first 46, 50 seconds of music. If I did the whole thing, it would take forever. So we're going to just take a little bit of time here. Excellent question in the comment section. Have you played this piece yourself? I actually have not played this piece myself. And we'll talk a little bit about that just a little bit later on after we go through all of these steps. So the initial markings. What do I do first? Well, for me, I use colored pencils. So the colored pencils, what this does is that once it's located in the score, my brain associates certain things with certain colors. Not all the time, but in this particular element, I look at the colored pencils and I know that, for example, blue means entrances. I should do this in order. Sorry, in order that I actually mark in the score. Green is going to be meter changes, or meter that you have. Blue is entrances, and red are those markings that are tempo oriented, or anything that says CRESC period in it, which doesn't mean anything to me. I need to actually write in a marking there. Elements that are going to be highlighted if I'm going to use a specific, and in this piece I use this to highlight a crescendo that's in one part that's not in any of the other parts, things like that. So I use these colored pencils. These are the only colors that I use. I know some people who use yellow or pink or highlighter. I've seen highlighter going through. Some people will highlight the parts that they want to highlight in their conducting. I tried that. Doesn't work for me. Colored pencils works great. So I suggest doing something and sticking with it long enough to figure out if you like it. Do a number of different times, 3 scores through, 4 scores through. Try it and say, red doesn't work for me. No problem. Use orange or use yellow or something like that. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I write in the time signatures that I'm going to be doing. So right off the bat, you actually get something that's kind of interesting. You have something that is written in 7, and you think, how am I going to group this? So immediately when I look at 7, in 7, this could either be really slow in 7 or actually conducted in a different meter where the grouping ends up in 7/8 notes. So something that keys me into this idea is the tempo up at the top. So it's a 138. So it's relatively quick. And so it's very unlikely that this is going to be slow. Also, it has presto on it. So that tells me that it's going to be some subdivision of 7. So when you do this, it's really handy here because the composer has beamed some of the stuff together. Now, this doesn't always work out because sometimes the publisher rebeams it or changes it However, this is a good place to start. So the first thing I think is, well, can I do a group of 4 eighth notes and a group of 3 eighth notes? I'm like, okay, well, let's try that. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So maybe you do it in 2? Maybe? Let's try it. So then I think to myself, as a trumpet player, someone sitting in the ensemble, does this make any sense? Now, to me, it doesn't, because I would say, well, how do I know where the other eighth notes go? There's way too much space, and the first one looks all loopy and weird. What can I do to clean that up? So perhaps I could do a subdivision of the first 2 eighth notes. So 1 and 2, and that sets me up for a nice 1, 2, 3 at the end of it. So the eighth note subdivision could be in 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And I think, wow, that makes sense to me as a musician. Perhaps it will also make sense to the other musicians that I'm talking to. Now, if you have access to a telephone, you could call or email or text the composer and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing the beginning in 3. What do you think? Or call, text, or email any of your friends and say, hey, I've got this thing. It's in 7/8. I'm thinking about doing it in 3. See what the responses are. So I'm going to say I'm going to do it in 3. So what I do is I put a gigantic 3 at the top. So you might be saying, hey, there's all kinds of other stuff on this piece of paper that has numbers on it. Why are you writing gigantic 3s? And I'll tell you about that as soon as I'm done writing these 3s on this piece of paper. And again, I have one that's complete, so you won't watch me do this whole thing. That would take forever. So now you've got something that looks like this. So to me, this number 3, whoops, there we go, is makes a lot more sense than that little tiny 7/8. Also, as I'm going through, I put it in 3 places in the score. I've also done this where I've done 4 places in the score, 5 places in the score. Now, this is a method that almost everyone that I know utilizes who's a conductor. Now, I don't know why composers don't just put gigantic numbers in the score, because we all put them in anyway. But this is what everyone uses. And it's really easy for me to see this, and it's easy for you to see this. As you're looking at this, you see a whole bunch of black down here, but there's a giant number 3 there. So you think, okay, the beginning is going to be in 3. And so that's what I would generally do for time changes. Another thing that I do is indicate the subdivision. So I said already I'm going to do the first 4 eighth notes in 2 plus 2 and then 3. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So I indicate that in my score by going like this. So I've got these 2 things that go down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now to me, that means 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So the down line means 2 eighth notes. Down line means 2 eighth notes. The triangle means 3 eighth notes. Now, again, maybe that doesn't translate to your brain. Totally fine. Maybe I'm the only one who does that. Perhaps. But this makes sense to me. And so that's what I put into this score. So that's how I decide what the markings are going to be. So, Raphael, thanks so much for your comments. And Billy, thanks for sharing this video and enjoying it. I'm going to go ahead and just turn to the next page. I'll go back and catch up on that comment in a second. This is what it looks like when you have a number of different meters on the same page. So the gigantic numbers go in the middle. And I do this first because I don't want to have any of the instrument markings getting in the way of the numbers of where the beats are. So that's just the way that I do it. Again, it might not work that way for you. This is page 3. Measures 13 through 18, and you can see also I have these little downward strikes and triangles to indicate what I'm doing. At the very end of this page over here, as you can see, I actually have written in the next meter on the next page, followed by the subdivision of that page. And so I do that so it gives me a little preview about what's happening. What happens next? I don't know. I can turn the page and find out, or I can write, hey, the next bar is in 4, especially on something that's going quickly for here. So I go through and I do that with this green pencil. We'll go ahead and look at these comments. So Raphael says, I call their score as an aid for rehearsal preparation. Absolutely. I agree with that. And I'm actually going to readdress that at the very end. And after many years of this, I don't highlight entrances unless it is something really necessary. Absolutely. Most professional musicians can count. Yes, most. Absolutely. I also go through, we'll talk a little bit at the end about the process that I do and why I go through and mark out every entrance and things like that. So actually, we'll start talking about that very next. And giant meters on the page. Yes, Carmina Brown is an excellent example. Stephen Bryant, also his music goes and has giant meters. I really enjoy that as well. Thank you very much, Stephen. So next is blue. So why do I mark all of the instruments and all of the entrances? Okay, so for example, the scores that have the Cajun folk songs, this one here, and the score that has the Magnolia Star here have different groupings of instruments. On the first page of the score and throughout the rest of it, there's different numbers of every instrument, and the instruments are grouped differently than in Magnolia Star. So for me personally, I want to have a reference of which instrument is playing on which line. So over here, you can see the bassoon. They have an entrance at the beginning. We've got the clarinets. They've bracketed across, bass clarinets, saxophones, and trumpets. These are the first people who come in at the very beginning. So for me personally, I write those in because when I'm switching from score to score very quickly, I want to be able to fetch the information of which instrument is playing on which line. Because if you're doing like orchestral transcriptions or if you're doing chamber music followed by this, I want to be sure that I know which instrument is going on. Even if I have it in my head and I've memorized this instrument goes here, I want to have that information in the score. So I use blue for that. So as you can see here, we've got some stuff at the very beginning. I'm looking at bassoon. I'll write this down real quick. Well, it's not going to be real quick. It'll take a couple seconds. And then we've got clarinet, we've got alto saxophone, and we've got trumpets. So my initial score might look something like this. I've done this very quickly, but it'll give you an idea. You can see here that there's an entrance in the trumpet in the third bar. I will also put that in there as well. Something that I do in this particular piece is that I translate the subdivision to where that note happens, so I can be reminded as to where that note happens within this bar. So you've got the trumpet line here, you've got the trumpet line here, and then I remind myself trumpet is going to play, and they play on the second subdivision of 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. Right? You can also see here that I've written in percussion. Now, the reason I've put percussion in next to the trumpet line is it eases my transition between the trumpets and the percussion, which are way down here. So for this particular percussion line, I see this as a continuation and a equal partner to the woodwind line that is happening up above here. And I'll figure out this camber angles eventually. Just hang with me. So I want these to be more united in my mind. And so I've put a kind of a ghosting of what that part looks like here. So that's kind of how I use these elements. Joe Studley, I hope you're enjoying Florida. Thank you for taking time and checking this out. Please, if you have any comments or suggestions, chime right in, please. So I write in all of these instruments first in blue. So you would have something like this, and you would have at the entrance in measure 5, you've got some horn players coming in and some trombones, some euphoniums, and tubas. Now, I don't always group the euphoniums and the tubas together in the same section, but in this case, they're playing something that is very, very similar. So I do group those into the same brackets. So if you have questions so far, go ahead and put them up in the comments. If you have comments about how you do it, love to hear how you do it, and maybe it's slightly different than how I do it for sure. So the next thing I do is I use this red pencil, and I do this for tempo. So at the very beginning of the piece, you might have quarter note equals 138, and so that might look like this on the top of your paper. Things that I also use this for are CRESC period, and I draw in a crescendo, decrescendo, DECRES dot, something like that. I don't know. So then I'd use that for decrescendo. I would also use this if I have an instrument that has a crescendo by itself, for example, in the percussion. And you can see that here, down here. So you've got a crescendo in the percussion that is nowhere else. I want to highlight that, so I go ahead and put that in red. If all of a sudden there was a new element here, you would be able to use that highlighter in red as well. There's something else that I've chosen to do with this, which is in measure 24. In measure 24, in the trumpet part, there's a forte piano fall with a crescendo. I believe that every instrument should emulate that same shape. It's a very cascading line, which all triplets. But I think the whole thing works well if each instrument plays, enters, and backs off, and then crescendos through. So I've put that in there as well. So this is kind of my own interpretation of what the composer is doing. So Raphael actually puts a really great comment in the section, in the comment section here, and he says, "Why did this composer decide to make this score laid out like this?" That is a great question. I don't know the answer to it, but I can find out by asking the composer actually, and I'll ask him and make sure I get back to you and ask him about why he decided to put it in this particular order. I know that. I don't want to speak for him at all, so I will ask and find out and make sure to get back to you on that too. And again, it's a really great way to interact with the composers and find out if you have questions about that. So that's red. So we're down through the colors. Great. So now we've put some colors in there. The very next thing that I do in terms of my initial markings, sorry, I skipped this one. Don't ever skip this one. Is that I put measure numbers down on the bottom. Now this composer has been really gracious, and he's already put those measure numbers in on the bottom, which is really great. I find that easier to determine where the parts are playing. I know that my teacher at the University of Southern Mississippi, Dr. Catherine Rand, she puts all of her measure numbers straight through the center of the score. And that makes more sense to her visually, which is fantastic. It works great for her. For me, I get confused with the stuff in the middle. I like to have it right down at the bottom. That's where my eyes go first in terms of determining what measure I'm on. So different elements for different people, and certainly pick something that works for you. There's people who do it up at the top. There's people who only do every beginning of every page, whatever works for you. Okay, the next thing I do is I do a partial kind of chordal analysis. I have an idea about who's playing where the players are coming in, where they're exiting, where the band or orchestra or choir is doing all of their note making together. So what I do is I look into a couple of things, kind of cadential points, the beginning, kind of ends of phrases, to see, is this traditional harmony? In Bandland, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is not based on traditional harmony. This particular piece is really great because the composer in the composer's notes at the beginning has said, hey, this is based on blues music and these triads. And so you see that throughout the piece, and it helps you determine, okay, well, this F sharp is actually a G flat, and it's probably a flat 5, and so now we're going to increase the sound on this particular note. So I'd encourage you to do that. Now, the reason I do this very early in the process is because this is by far the hardest part for me to complete. Mostly because I'm not good at it, and second of all, it's because I don't like it, and shockingly, those two things are related. Think about those two things in your life, right? So if I don't do them first, I don't complete them. So I always do that. If time allows, I always complete those first because I'm just not good at it. So if I don't do it at the beginning, I leave it off, because all the fun part for me personally is like the inner phrase grouping and the notes grouping, and how is this phrase going to be shaped, and what do these sounds want to be. So to get to that, it's like my carrot dangling at the end. I'm like, well, I can get to that, but first I have to look at some theory. So annoyingly enough, it's really helpful. So I continue to try and improve that as I go through each new score. Okay, so step 3. Create the music from the score in my mind and assess markings. So what that means, or make it